Hey guys, this is Brad from Blue Nile Farm. Welcome to episode number 20 from the Farming from Scratch video podcast. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important attachments that you see in today's market when we talk about tractors. And what I'm talking about are tractors that are compact tractors, utility tractors, and even tractors over 100 horsepower. And that is the loader. You know, when you buy a tractor, almost every one of them come with a loader. And a lot of times people just think of it as part of the tractor, but realistically it is an attachment. And that attachment is what makes or breaks you in a lot of tasks that you do on the farm. And if you're new to purchasing a tractor, I kind of want to cover this because it's very important. And I think a lot of people miss the mark when they purchase tractors. And this is kind of why I kind of lean toward the utility tractor size more than I do a compact, especially when we're talking about a farming operation, somebody that's doing certain tasks and want to pursue them. And I think sometimes people purchase too small a tractor because they're missing the mark, because they're thinking about the horsepower, but they're not really looking at the loader and how the loader has a very important part into what they're doing, but it also has to be coupled with the right size tractor. So let's discuss this a little bit. If you go to any dealership, and it doesn't matter if it's a Mahindra, if it's an LS, if it's a Kubota, if it's a John Deere, if it's a New Holland, and the list goes on, you're going to see that everything that you go into their showroom has basically a loader on it. And they market that tractor based on having a loader. And what's nice is when you buy that tractor, you pay actually extra for the loader. You're thinking you're buying the whole tractor, but you're buying the tractor and the loader. And each loader that comes with the tractor is designed specifically for that size tractor. So if I buy a Kubota 7060, for example, there's a loader that's made specifically for that tractor, and it's installed on that tractor. If I buy a smaller compact tractor, there's a loader made by that manufacturer to fit that brand. Now, a lot of times though, especially when we're talking about older style tractors, you know, when I was a kid growing up, you know, if you even went and bought a tractor, normally you're just buying a tractor and never came with the loader. And it could be, you know, a lot of tractors I grew up with were the old Ford 800s, Ford 8Ns and 9Ns, and they were older tractors, but they never had loaders. And if they did, they're basically weren't as efficient as the loaders of today. And, you know, in the 80s, when I graduated high school, the Kubota just became kind of a new popular tractor on the market, and it came with a loader, and a lot of tractors were very small. And a lot of the owners during that time loved them, but you didn't see a lot of people actually owning them like you see today. But when you go to a dealership at any different brand that you actually want to purchase, you walk into the showroom, and the first thing you're going to see is a nice shiny tractor, and you're going to see it attached to a loader. Now, the kicker that you need to understand is that the loader is an extra helping hand to a lot of operations people do. And I work with individuals that actually own property, maybe own 2 or 3 acres. They have a nice house, and they choose to go out and buy a compact tractor. And they buy that compact tractor specifically for cutting grass. They're not looking at farming. They'll never farm. And they purchase this tractor with a loader, and they use the loader basically to move mulch, maybe to move a little bit of dirt, but they're not really using that machine like somebody that's actually in agriculture or on a farm or basically in the forestry type work. They're basically interested in just basically playing with it and moving things around a little bit. But predominantly that tractor is designed for cutting grass. When you're actually trying to start off in farming and you really want to start developing a farm, the biggest thing is that you really don't know. A lot of people start farming, they have an impression of what they're going to do, but they really don't think down the road where they're going to be 15, 10, 20 years from now. And a lot of times when you buy a tractor, you have to kind of think that way because it's probably one of the best and biggest investments that you have. So, you know, when you buy a tractor and it has a loader to it, the most important aspect of it not only is the horsepower and what we can run with different types of attachments, but we have to consider the loader itself. And the reason I bring this up is that each loader has a lifting capacity. And also it has a height that it can actually lift a product actually to. So first off, let's talk about lifting capacity. you know, when you have a tractor that is smaller, like a compact tractor, you might only have a lifting capacity of 1,000 pounds. When you get into utility tractors, tractors that are over 50, you may have to be able to lift 2,500 pounds or 3,000 pounds or even more, depending on that tractor and that manufacturer. But part of the problem too with tractors is that these tractors themselves aren't that heavy. They're not like running a tow motor or a skid steer. These tractors here, like this little LS, is probably weighs 5,000 pounds. You know, so if I get a product and it can easily lift over a ton, and I have a ton of product to actually pick up with a set of forks and lift it up, it's on the front end. All the weight is dispersed to the front end, and it's not very easy to control with these tractors. That's why when you purchase a loader tractor and you're actually going to move a product, whether it's dirt or maybe it's a skid of something, or even if it's wood, if it weighs a lot of weight, you need to get something that's a counterbalance on the back end. So a lot of times people will actually take attachments, you know, whether it's a rototiller or a brush hog or, you know, or some other product and that's heavy, and they put it on the back of their tractor to be a counterbalance because of the weight that they're lifting actually with the tractor. So when you buy a tractor, you need to keep in mind that what are you, besides cutting grass or attachments that you're using, you got to establish what is that loader going to lift and what is its potential. Because down the road, if you decide that you're going to buy horse bedding or grain and you want to buy it by the pallet, almost everything is sold by the ton. So you want to get the right piece of equipment that's able to lift that kind of weight. And you want to do it safely. And the downfall with tractors that people don't realize is that when you have a tractor and it's not really designed as a lifting tool consistently, like say a forklift or even like a skid steer. You know, this tractor, they sell you loaders because it's something you do once in a while, or it's more for lifting light material. It's not designed to do any heavy lifting on a consistent basis. And what you'll find is that a lot of times, if you ever buy a tractor with a loader on it and you're actually overloaded, something that's very heavy for you to lift, you'll actually feel sometimes if that load shifts or you don't pick it up exactly the right way, the whole tractor and the loader is starting to come off, and you have, like, you're on 3 wheels, and you feel like the whole machine's actually torquing and twisting because you're kind of overloaded. And it's a very eerie and awful feeling because it's very easy for you to flip a tractor over with a lot of weight. And even if you have a loader in the manufacturer's bucket, and say you're picking up something like stone or dirt, and it weighs a lot more than you expect, and you have a full scoop of it, and you're driving your tractor and you're trying to turn, all of a sudden your balance is off, and that machine could actually almost flip on you, and you'll feel that feeling like you're going to go over. And a lot of people don't realize that it's really a tough match trying to get the right tractor with the right load. There is a huge difference in using a skid steer or a commercial backhoe with a loaded amount of dirt, and that's very heavy, and you'll feel very comfortable. But when you take a tractor like this with these attachments, you know, they're not really designed to carry large and heavy weight. And that's why I think people miss the boat on when they purchase a loader on a tractor. Now, they're very successful for people that are farming. And, you know, even I have friends and neighbors that buy hay from me, and they'll come out and buy a round bale, and a round bale might weigh 500 pounds, and they'll come in with a small compact tractor trying to pick it up. And a lot of times they can't lift it sometimes, or if it's snowing and you don't have enough traction, and they're spinning their tires and they can't get the load off the ground because the machine doesn't have the ability to pick up that weight and move it. So shopping and getting the right tractor and the right loader with the right horsepower that can lift the products you're looking for is critical. And when you go out and buy a tractor, and that's kind of one of the concepts I'm really trying to push to people when they go out and purchase these tractors. Way too many people buy compacts that are too light, and they're very discouraged by what they have. Let me give you an example. There are a lot of guys that decide that they're going to put a wood-burning stove in, and a lot of people decide and they learn that keeping firewood in the IBC tote is very convenient because you can put this tote, fill it with firewood, grab a set of forks, pick it up, and drive it and move it into your barn and store wood. And actually, it's really an efficient and easily way to manage firewood. The downfall is they don't realize that once you start loading up the skid with a bunch of firewood, it gets kind of heavy. And a lot of guys don't have the lifting capacity to pick up a skid of wood because their tractors are too light, or they're so light that, you know, once you start going on uneven ground, you basically don't have the traction and you feel very unsafe. And that's one thing people don't realize, is that if you're on a concrete pad and you're picking up weight and moving it around, that's one thing. But when you get on the gravel, or you get onto dirt or in the woods, and you're picking up a large weight of a product and you're picking up with your loader, you're going to feel very unsafe sometimes, because you might be max loaded and you're going to feel like your tractor is going to tip over. Even for myself, a lot of times I use these tractors with loaders for my hay operation. And you know, what I need to do is I go out and we spear round bales out in the field. And there's times I come in and I grab a round bale, and I may be a little bit, say the round bale is a 4x5 bale and it's kind of heavy, it's almost 1,000 pounds, even though this machine can lift over 2,000, just by the where it is, and as I'm turning, or maybe I'm falling into a hole, you're going to feel like the machine's going to go over because of the amount of weight that's way out ahead of you. See, the one thing with tractors that's a little bit different that people don't understand is that when you have a loader and you have the weight way out in front of you, it basically puts all the weight out there and it's very well extended. And the farther it is, the heavier it actually is to the machine. That's why with having a counterweight on your 3-point allows you to have some kind of balance. And when you don't have that counterweight, you're stuck. The other factor is when you have a lot of weight, you want to be in 4-wheel drive, so you have all 4 tires moving. Because a lot of times you will have be in 2-wheel drive, and you will actually use this loader and pick up any kind of material, and all of a sudden, because you're not having all your 4 tires on the ground because of the weight differential and maybe uneven ground, sometimes all of a sudden you'll start spinning and you don't want to have control. So 4-wheel drive is very important with loaders. Actually, I wouldn't even own a loading tractor without a 4-wheel drive. And the reason for that is because of the issue of coming in and getting it. Now, if you're just going out in a hayfield in dry summer conditions, a 2-wheel drive would be fine. But when you're out here in wintertime or rainy, muddy conditions, 4-wheel drive all day, every day is the only way to go. And that's very important with loaders, because you want to have that enough force and enough traction to actually get in there and be able to pick up a load and get into that pile. And that's very important. So I would highly suggest only buying, in today's market, a loader with 4-wheel drive. That's almost important. And like I say, the most important thing, if I was buying a loader, depending on what I was going to lift, always buy a loader that has the lifting capacity of the loader as well as lifting capacity of the tractor. That's number one. And you want to get as much tractor as possible. Now, my ideal tractor, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, I believe a 70 horsepower tractor, if you were starting a farm, is probably the best and most ideal machine out there to pick up a load and move it with the loader. And it's probably the most versatile tractor because it has enough PTO horsepower and lift capacity to do so many things and run so many different attachments. I think, plus it's small enough that you're not kind of like overburdened. It's a tractor that you can easily load on a trailer. It's one that you could take and do all kinds of side jobs. It can make you money. And it's actually a good start in a lot of agricultural areas that it can actually do something, maybe not doing tillage, but it can do a lot of things like in the hay industry to be, you know, not only collect hay bales out in the field, but it can run rakes, it can run tedders, it can run balers. You know, it can be a very effective tractor in the hay operation, and that's what I use mine for specifically. But I also rely on 100-plus power tractors to do the tillage and also to run certain pieces of equipment. But again, the other thing, and the reason why I also push the 70-horse tractors, is the safety aspects of being able to lift something of fairly heavy weight. Now, when we talk about loaders, the other thing that I want to talk about is I believe that you have different options, and you always want to have something that's called a quick attach. What a quick attach is started with Bobcat, but basically, and there's other brands that have them, but with quick attach, there's basically 2 levers, and if you can come into any kind of bucket, whether you're using a grapple or whether you're using a Bale hugger, you know, a lot of things are quick attach. And you can change all kinds of buckets that are on the market as long as you have a quick attach. Whereas you can come in and it can basically, there's little grooves, and you can come in and they hook into the groove, and then they have handles that actually push down, and there's pins on the bottom that will actually lock that bucket onto your loader. And that makes more versatility in your tractor. Now, there's a lot of different buckets on the market, and we're going to talk about buckets another day. But just to give you an idea on buckets, you know, you have skeleton buckets where you can actually sift material. You have different size buckets that you can use. And you can even buy something called a snow pusher, that if you're in a snow zone like I am, that they're basically like big box scrapers that are up in the front. And you can use them to help push snow and remove that. There's stump buckets, which are basically look like diamonds. They're kind of cut inward, and some of them are more narrow, and they're used to actually root out stumps. But you can also use them to actually push dirt into small, tight spaces. So instead of having a wide bucket and dumping material, you can have a very narrow bucket, and you can actually control your dump into one fine spot. So say I have a hole or of dirt, I can actually use a stump bucket, load it with dirt, and pour it into that hole, and I won't make a mess. It's all going to go into my hole. So that's one of the things that you can use also. Then there's grapples that are on the market that you can utilize, and they are basically allowing you to grab material, whether it's a log, whether it's debris, whether it's a bunch of sticks, whatever, and hay. You know, a lot of times I use grapples all the time for hay that are out in the field, and you can come in and grab an item and pick it up with like a big claw and then move it, and then you can dump it. Now, anytime you use a grapple, or even a bale hugger for that matter, where you come into a round bale and it hugs it, and you're hugging round bales because they're wrapped. What reason why you want to use a loader is because they're very efficient, but you also want to get something called a third function valve. And what a third function valve is basically a switch that's in the cab or on the tractor right by the loader, where you can push it and it can open and shut the jaws. It is basically based on hydraulics from your tractor that run to the front end of the loader, and you just plug in these two hoses, and it allows you to open and shut your jaws. And it may not be very common in a lot of tractors, but it's something that's more like an add-on that you would do, and it's probably an extra $1,000 to put one on a tractor. But I'm going to tell you, if you ever use a grapple, you would definitely want to get a third function valve, because it makes it so much easier to do. Now, some guys try to be cheap and run hoses from their back end of the tractor where they have remotes, and run it forward. And in your tractor, you'll have a lever to switch remotes. But the problem is it's taking your hands away from doing other things. By having a third function valve, you can use everything by your thumb and have your hand on your loader, so it gives you more control. And that's the only way that I would actually even think about running a grapple type piece of equipment, is with a third function valve. And if that's something that's new to you, you know, I'll show you in another video specifically what they actually are. But they're basically designed specifically for tractors, and it works out really, really well. And like I said, that's the only way I would even use it. The other thing that you need to take in consideration when we're talking about loaders is that you can also use some of these, and you'll see on the market, other attachments like postal diggers that are connected to your front end on a tractor. I'm not a big fan of them. I don't think that they're going to be very efficient. You know, on a skid steer, that's one thing. On a tractor, I'm not going to kind of jump up and down about. But, you know, I think that they are available. And again, the third function valve would be important, because it would put hydraulic fluid into that drill and actually allow you to operate it based on that. So third function valve is very important. The other biggest thing that I would tell you with loaders is that a lot of times once they're on, you can remove these from your tractor if you want to. I've never removed mine at all. I know some people like to do that, but they are removable, and there's something you don't necessarily have to have. But I highly endorse having a loader on any kind of utility or compact tractor if that's something you desire, because it makes them very versatile. But there is a big difference between using these and using them in comparison to a skid steer. And I'm going to talk about that another day because they both have their positives and their minuses. But, you know, as an extra bonus, if I was going to go out today in today's market and buy a tractor, whether it's new or used, I would only buy a four-wheel drive tractor with the loader, because it's going to give you more versatility, and it's the smartest purchase you can do. But the most important thing that I want to talk about today, and it's really where I want to head home, is the fact that you got to look at your lift capacity. Now, one other thing I want to talk about with lift capacity. If the tractor, like say this LS tractor that I have here, has a lift capacity of 2,500 pounds, that means that all the way down to the first pin here in the front of the tractor, it can lift 2,500 pounds. But the attachment adds weight. So you need to look at the type of attachment you're putting onto this tractor and have to subtract it from its lift capacity. So say, for example, I have a bucket and my bucket weighs 500 pounds and this tractor can lift 2,500 pounds. That means that I have to subtract the 500 pounds for the bucket from the tractor, and that means I can only lift 2,000 pounds. And that's something you need to know of. So automatically, based on the attachment, I can only lift a ton. Now, if I have, say, a set of forks, and that set of forks weighs 300 pounds, and my tractor can lift 2,500 pounds, I have 2,200 pounds. I'm only going to have 200 pounds of latitude, which isn't a lot, to lift a pallet up and down. Now, as I go higher, the harder it is for the tractor. So that 200 pounds may make it very dangerous for us to move it. And I've had a lot of close calls with this little tractor here. Even though I've lifted skids many times over, once it's on perfect, it's great. But I'm telling you, once you start backing up and that load shifts just a little bit, you could actually feel the tractor's lift and twist, and it becomes very dangerous. So it's very, very, very important to you to be very careful and go very slow when you utilize these tractors when they're very heavily loaded. But pay attention to your lift capacity and also add in there what your attachment is, because it's going to have a major factor in what you do. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with tractors is the height differential. You know, a lot of these smaller compact tractors, people buy them and they think they're going to grab dirt and they're going to grab mulch and they're going to load a trailer. Some of these small compact trailers can only lift this high, and then they'll have their bucket up here and they'll dump. Well, basically my dump trailer is about this high, you know, almost 4.5, 5 foot. So if those little compacts can't lift and only get to 5 foot, they can't even load the trailer. They can barely load it. So having a bigger tractor, utility tractor, is going to be more beneficial because of the height differential. So it's very important that you go check on how high you can actually lift the product. Also, for example, this LS is a 55 horsepower tractor. My Kubota tractor is a 70 horse tractor, and it can lift almost 14 foot. This one lifts about 12 and a half, almost 13 foot. It causes me a lot of problems when I try to stack hay, because I need that extra foot to stack it properly. In the field, this tractor works great because it can load up on my wagons in the field. But when I come home, this is not the tractor I want to stack hay in my barn, because it only stacks hay 3 bales high, whereas my Kubota will stack 4 bales high. And that makes a big difference for me to do. Now, there's another thing I want to talk about with loaders, especially with buckets, and they talk about being a self-leveling loader. I am not a big fan of self-leveling. What self-leveling means is when you have your bucket in the tractor, as you lift the tractor, the lip of that bucket will always kind of stay straight. If you have a bale spear and you lift, it's always going to stay straight. It's not going to be able to curl. So what happens is when you really try to curl a bucket backward so you won't lose a load, you cannot do it as well, and you're not going to have as much curl with the self-leveling bucket as you would without having it. And I would suggest you do not purchase a self-leveling bucket. You don't really need one, because if you learn to look at your loader, you're always going to have some kind of bar or some kind of lever that you can kind of judge when you're level and when you're not. And as long as you pay attention to that, you can be your own self-leveler. The problem is when the tractor self-levels, a lot of times if your bucket is straight, you're going to lose material because you're not going to allow yourself to get that curl to keep everything into the bucket that you're looking for. So that's something to pay attention to. I made a mistake because when I first bought this LS, I had an option and I said, I'm cool with the self-leveling, but I found out that the self-leveling bucket really does not help me at all in my day-to-day operation. It was a huge mistake. So pay attention to that. Now ask these questions before you go, because the more you understand about loaders, the better off you'll be. So with that said, that's pretty much why I want to kind of give you a little opening and an idea about loaders. The biggest thing, like I said, is the lift capacity, and it has to match the tractor. That means if you have your heart set on a compact tractor, you may be very disappointed if that doesn't deliver what you're expecting. So if you're going to look and buy a tractor, you have to really look at what is your future potential and what you're going to get out of it. Personally, I'd rather spend a little bit more money and get the tractor you really want than to get less of a tractor you want, and you're going to be very disappointed. Also, the bigger the tractor, the bigger the loader, the quicker you can get the job done, the safer you can get the job done. And for example, plowing snow. You know, you're not really taking a lot of material, but you are pushing that. And you know, if I got to go out with a smaller tractor, I want to get the bigger tractor with the bigger loader so I can get more done quicker. I see a lot of guys that go out with these small tractors and they try to, say, push snow with the smaller loader, and they're there 3 times as long as I am with the bigger tractor. So you have to take that in consideration too, is your time management. You know, if you have all day to sit there and play, that's fine, but I don't have time like that. I want to get the job done, and I want to get it done as quick and as efficient as possible. And, you know, I have a larger area than some other people, so I want to make sure that time is well invested. You know, and I started out slowly with a lot of different attachments with my tractors, and I never was lucky to have a loading tractor for many, many, many years. Actually, out of my farming experience of owning my own farm for 30 years, probably over 15 years of it, over 15 years, almost 15 years, almost 20 years, I didn't have a loading tractor at all. I didn't know how I got by. And so what I wound up having is I went from a compact tractor of the old Ford 800. The second tractor I bought was the Oliver 1855, which was a 100-horse tractor with no loader. And the third tractor that I bought was actually a commercial-sized backhoe, which is a John Deere 510B, which is a very large backhoe with a big bucket, and it was only 2-wheel drive. And that was my introduction to loading tractors. Then I wound up buying the LS, came with a loader, and I started getting more into my hay operation. Then I wound up buying my Kubota with the loader. So 2 tractors. Oh, another thing I want to point out too. When you go out and you buy a tractor from a dealership, it's very, very important that you test out these loaders and find out if you really like them or not. And what I mean by that is check on the speed and how quick it moves and how quick it dumps. You know, this LS, for example, which in comparison to my Kubota, and I'm not knocking brands at all, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to tell you there was a difference in speed between the lift and the curl that I had with the LS versus the Kubota, and it seemed like this tractor specifically was slower than my Kubota. Now, some people tell me that they have no problem with their LS. Maybe I got the wrong tractor, and maybe it's not tuned right, or for some reason it's a lot slower than I wanted. So make sure you are happy with how quick your bucket goes up, how quick it turns, because I'm going to tell you something, there's nothing worse than sitting there and trying to pull back and watching it go really slow up and really slow down, where, you know, you want one that moves smoothly and quickly and is very comfortable for you. You don't want one that snaps and jerks. You want one to run smooth and quick and comfortable for something that you can handle. And the more you have experience working these tractors, the better off you'll be. And maybe you say, well, I'm new to tractors, I want it to go slow. But eventually you're going to get a handle on what you're driving, and you're going to find out that you want something to be quick and efficient. And that's just my suggestion too. You got to try these things out. Find out what you have, check the lift capacity, check on your attachments. Understand too, the bigger the tractor, the bigger your attachment. So the weight is going to also change to what you manage as well. So all this has to come into concern to you when you buy a machine. Because also, as you get bigger, the width of your tractors get bigger. You know, like if you have a 70 horse tractor or a 55 horse tractor, you can easily use a 72-inch or an 84-inch bucket, easily. You know, if you're getting into a compact tractor, maybe you're only going to have a 6-foot bucket. You know, it all depends on the machine that you're purchasing, or you might even have a 5-foot bucket. And how much material can you hold? So you have to take all this into consideration. You know, when you have a small bucket and you're only scooping up a wheelbarrow's worth of material, believe me, you're going to be there a long time when you can have a bigger tractor that can grab more material that you can actually scoop up at one time. It makes a huge difference, and it's going to save you a lot of time, and you'll not be so frustrated. Let me give you a quick example. A lot of times I get manure from a couple people that have horses. They all have little compact tractors. If I'm at home and I have my backhoe or my skid steer, it'll take me 10 scoops to get a yard or 10 yards worth of material. Generally, I'll have my trailer full, I'm on the road in 10 scoops. I go over to these people's houses and they're loading me up with their compact tractors. I seriously have to sit there for at least 45 minutes and watch them make 20 to 30, maybe 40 loads to finally, so I can get done, so I can leave. It takes all day long. It's crazy. So it's a big difference in time management by having the right tractor. And if it wasn't for cutting grass, you know, if you have a compact tractor and if you would say, hey, I'm going to get a zero turn in comparison to a compact tractor, and I'm not going to use it for cutting grass, I suggest you always get a bigger tractor. But the downfall with a lot of people with compacts is they want to cut grass with them, and that's fine, but be aware that other factors may be a limitation to what you're doing, especially when you get tractors with lift capacities. And I suggest you get the biggest tractor possible, and I believe in running specialty equipment for specialty jobs. And that's why, and that's the one thing I've learned over time, is that certain pieces of equipment are made to do specific things. And, you know, zero turns to me, cut grass, great, and that's what I use them for. Compact tractor, that would be fine, but, you know, if that was your goal. And I understand having one tool do multiple things is a good thing, but understand it's going to be a factor for you for lifting capacity if you are not able to get the right machine, because sometimes if you get a big tractor like this, you may not want to cut your grass with something this big. You know, maybe you do. It all depends on how you have, because then you can have different types of tires and go. Most of my tractors are set up for ag tires. You know, I don't use the R14s. I use ag. You know, but if you want to even go to a turf tire, then these things would be doing you just as fine. But I still would try to get a bigger tractor if necessary so I can have the lift capacity. Again, think about what you're using these tractors for and don't sell yourself short. Don't let the money be your driving force, because you're better off to get a bigger tractor and find a used one than you are to buy a brand new tractor and get one too small, because you'll be very disappointed. And there's plenty of used tractors out there that you can get with low hours and get a good deal on and almost save yourself half the money if you look around. The downfall is you may have to pay some interest, because the good deals of having 0% or very low interest loans for new tractors will be out the door, and you might be paying like 7 to 8% in today's market. So, but again, these are attachments, and people do not look at the loaders as attachments, but they are an attachment to what you purchase. And I would suggest that if I was going to look for a tractor, you want to find one with the loader. So I think you'll get more bang for your dollar. So with that said, thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully this was a little bit helpful to give you a little bit of ideas on loaders, and as they are a very important piece to buying a tractor, and you cannot look at it as part of a tractor, even though it is truly just an attachment, and it is a helping hand that is well worth having, especially when you're trying to have one piece of equipment to be very diverse. This is a very big goal for it. If you handle hay, you handle wood, you need a grapple. I mean, these things can do so many different things, and I can't live without a loader. And these utility tractors, for me, you know, it's like a requirement. I would not ever own a utility tractor size, something that's under 100 horse. you know, it's a 50 horse without a loader. Very, very important. So thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for listening. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you on the next thing. Please follow my podcast. Check out some of the other videos we have on this podcast. I think you enjoy it, and hopefully it'll help you, because this is just a little bit of ideas and creative thinking that I'm trying to do to help people that are interested in starting to farm from scratch. So again, see you later. Stay safe.